Welcome to PCMag Live. I'm Alex Colon and this is Sasha Segan. And today we're going to talk about the top 3 news stories of the day, answer one of your questions, and show you something cool from the PCMag labs. So let's start with the first news story, which is that Motorola, they might have put the final nail in the feature phone coffin with their latest smartphone, the Moto E.
Yeah, and so the Moto E is a $130 Android 4.4 smartphone with a really nice Qualcomm Snapdragon 200 processor, 4.3-inch screen, 5-megapixel camera, no LTE, but I mean, it's $130. And what Motorola is trying to do here, this comes out of the Google pipeline. Lenovo's in the process of buying Motorola, but this is a Google Rolla product here. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to establish a template for low-cost, high-quality Android smartphones to really drive through the developing world. And these are countries where people generally make somewhat less money than they do in the United States, where the countries don't really have LTE networks rolled out yet, and where a lot of people are still buying these sort of quasi-feature, quasi-smartphones like the Nokia Asha line and saying, no, you don't have to go for a quasi-feature phone. You don't have to go for one of these cheap, no-name Chinese smartphones. You can get a quality Android phone at a price you can afford.
And there's also some more news from Motorola. They just announced a new Moto G.
Yeah, and this is a lot more relevant to US and UK listeners. The Moto G LTE adds a micro SD memory card slot and LTE to the unlocked Moto G for $219. And now at $219, this is an amazing value for an LTE smartphone. The big question is which US carriers it's going to support, because all of our carriers have different LTE bands. That's something that I'm going to find out later today. We're going to write more about it on PCMag.com, of course. But really, if you're looking for a smartphone, a prepaid, no-contract LTE smartphone, once again, this really sets the bar for cost and quality here.
Definitely. I'm actually wondering, is there even a reason to buy a feature phone anymore?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people in the industry, and they say that there's always going to be a market for about 10 to 15% of people in developed countries wanting feature phones. And these are generally people who want extreme user interface simplicity. Right. They're often very elderly, or they're just Luddites. It's a small group of people, but they are going to continue to exist. And these are people who just use their phones a couple of minutes each day, maybe to make emergency calls, maybe to contact key family members. But the feature phone is definitely falling into being a small niche product as opposed to the mainstream.
Okay, let's move into our second news story, which is the NSA has been tipped to spy abroad with US-made web routers.
Yeah, and this is something that we heard about a couple of weeks ago, but Glenn Greenwald, who is sort of Edward Snowden's enabler, has a book out, and he needs to sell his book, so he's ripping pages out of his book, and he's handing them to all of these publications. And this one is a confirmation of what we heard a couple of weeks ago, that the NSA is grabbing Wi-Fi routers and network routers that are headed for export out of the US, installing spyware on them and boxing them back up. And so as a result, all of these routers around the world have NSA spyware in them. This should not surprise, I don't know, are you surprised? I'm not surprised.
No, not really.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious at this point that the only thing which is going to stop the NSA is major legislative action and an American popular revolt. And I'm sorry, our country just doesn't seem up to that, so everything's going to get spied on. You know, if you don't want everything to be spied on, take some action. What can I say?
And if you don't want to follow everyone on Twitter, you can now mute them with the mute button. That's our third news story of the day.
Nice segue, Alex.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so Twitter's mute button. So Twitter has had block functionality for a while. And block is this hardcore muting, especially for stopping harassers, which is a big problem on Twitter, which prevents someone from following you as well as you from following them. Mute is a much milder, softer approach. And what mute is for is if there's like a football game going on, you don't want to hear about football, and suddenly everybody's tweeting about football, you can mute all the football tweets. Or if you DVR a popular TV show, you can mute all the Game of Thrones tweets for a while. And I really like that. I like it giving you a little more granular control over the information you're receiving. I mean, have you found uses for this yet?
Well, I see it sort of like the Facebook unfollow button, where sometimes, maybe you've had enough of a friend for a little while and you just want to, turn them off for a bit without actually unfollowing them.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see people doing this, frankly, to me. I have a lot of Twitter followers, and I generally tweet a couple of times a day, like quips about tech news. But like if an Apple event is happening, I'll tweet like, 180 times in an hour live tweeting the Apple event. And this lets people mute me without unfollowing me, and then they can pick up when the Apple event is done. So I'm all for it.
And just to be clear, if you do mute someone, they can still see what you're tweeting, so they won't actually know that you've muted them.
Exactly, and that's a big difference between mute and block.
All right, now let's answer our reader question. This one comes from Reneel, who asked our features editor, Eric Griffith, via email, how do we avoid personal identity theft when we recycle technology?
I would say set it on fire. That's not Eric's answer, though. What's Eric's answer?
Well, Eric said that you could download their software out there, like Derek's Boot and Nuke, and you can use it to wipe a hard drive, and that'll make it as blank as it could possibly be. But if you're still not okay doing that, you can take the hard drive out of the computer and drill 3 holes into different spots, which is clearly the other nuclear option.
Right, or if you live in the western half of the US, you will probably want to shoot your hard drive several times with the many long guns you have in your house.
So yeah, either download a program or use brute force.
Yep, okay.
Now we're going to show you one cool thing from the PCMag Labs, which is the new Samsung Gear 2 smartwatch. Now this is a follow-up to the original Galaxy Gear that came out last year. It seemed like it was going to be a big release, but it kind of fizzled out. The Gear 2 is an attempt to improve upon it. It's still $300. It still only works with certain Samsung devices, but I've been wearing it for the last week. I think it's a lot better. It has a better processor. It's faster. It runs on Tizen software now instead of Android, but you won't actually notice that. The improvements that you will notice is that S-Voice works better. It has a bunch of fitness tracking capabilities. It basically does the same exact things as the Samsung Gear Fit, except it also has smartwatch functionality like apps. It's a good watch. I still think it's too expensive. I think it's still too limited because it's Samsung only. But I mean, it's an improvement. I still think that there's more room to grow, and I think we're probably going to see that when Android Wear comes out this summer.
Okay, great. So you'll be able to find, is that review up yet, or is it going up soon?
That review should be up in the next day or so.
Okay, great. So that review will be up soon on PCMag.com.
Yeah, and we'll see you tomorrow.